Hello, this is Glenda with AKA GK Fralin of Friendly Community, and you are welcome. I was fully prepared to come on here and tell you that I really didn't know what to say or do tonight. I had one of those down days, and my tummy hasn't been very good, and I could sit here and complain for an hour, but that wouldn't be very entertaining. And then Carla sends me a message that she sent me an email, and it's a story. So I'm going to read her story. I have something for the vlog. Thank you, Carla. If you grew up in the rural kind of backwoods area where you did hay rides and that kind of thing, this will be quite romantic. If not, you can enjoy the idea and get the picture in your mind from what you do know, maybe from TV or whatever. But here is Carla's story. Wolf. Larry had a little lamb. The lamb was black as coal, and everywhere that Larry went, the lamb just had to go. Lawrence Joshua Andrews III, or Larry, or LJ, smiled at the memory. His 4-H buddies hadn't meant it in a mean way. After all, Wolf did follow him everywhere he was allowed. However, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Wolf for short, was not a lamb. He was instead a rather large, black, standard poodle, and even now LJ's shadow. He was also the best herding dog they'd ever had. No fancy poodle cut for a working farm dog. Kept short through the summer for his comfort and easy grooming, Wolf's fur was left to grow after harvest. As a puppy, Wolf had looked a little like the lambs being shown at the 4-H fair, except for color. No black lambs in the show ring. On this particular cold December night, Wolf followed LJ on his final chores before he would join his gang for a barn party and a hayride. They'd missed Halloween due to an early blizzard. So his friends' parents had organized the barn party for them and their families. With chores done and all the gates secured, LJ and Wolf tramped across the whitened fields toward his friend's farm. They'd get a ride home on the hay wagon, warmed by his long winter coat. Wolf raced ahead, playing in the falling snow, then back to LJ. They had decorated the barn to the rafters. The music rose to join the sparkling garlands. From 6 months old to 95, they chatted, played games, danced, laughed, sang, and shared in the buffet of every family's special dishes. It was a wonderfully magical barn party. Wolf and Maggie, Mike Wilson's border collie, enjoyed their own special treats off to the side. Every now and then they ventured into the crowd, to the joy of the children, tiny arms wrapped around furry necks for a snuggle. Both dogs were used to children, and took it all in stride. Around midnight, Ed Wilson hitched up a pair of sorrel Belgian draft horses to the hay wagon, which had been modified for harnesses and painted a bright crimson. LJ, Mike, and their friends bundled under heavy blankets and rugs in the thick hay. Ed moved the horses off at a steady walk down, down the graveled farm roads. He was an old hand at this and enjoyed it as much as the kids, and joined in the singing accompanied by the Owens boy on harmonica. Joey was getting better all the time, LJ thought. He played first chair French horn in the band, hardly practical for a hayride. They'd take the long way around, dropping off the kids at the farthest farms first, and finish with LJ and Wolf, the closest farm. It wouldn't be as long a ride as usual due to the weather, but Ed intended it to be a good one. On cue, Mike passed around a large thermos of warm apple cider, cinnamon sticks, and insulated cups. He followed those with bags of his mother's famous popcorn balls. A roar of appreciation made Ed grin as he accepted his share. Grace had triumphed again. He was a lucky man. About half a mile from the first stop, Ed turned the team off the road onto a cleared path that ran between a wooded area and Tom Roberts' fields. He slowed just a bit. Not that the big, sure-footed horses couldn't manage just about anything, but it was rutted, and he didn't want to jostle his passengers too much. Spilled cider wasn't part of the plan. Wind was picking up a bit, and the light flurry of large flakes had turned to a steady fall of finer swirling powder. The lamps attached to the wagon turned the snow into diamond dust, doing pirouettes and leaps of light. It was Mother Nature's very best ballet. Oh, they'd have some significant drifts in the next 24 hours, from the looks of things, but for now it looked beautiful, and Ed Wilson had no doubts he'd have his charges home and safe long before the snow drifted the roads shut. With no warning, the wagon wheel lurched sharply into a hidden rut. The front axle made a horrible noise. Horses reared as they were pulled to an abrupt stop, and the wagon went over. Ed shook his head to clear it. Brushing snow from his eyes, he tried to get up. Back down he went. Leg wasn't working right. He called out to the kids, praying no one was under the wagon. One by one they began answering. He crawled toward the voices, touching them, each as he found them. Luckily, they'd all been thrown free. There were injuries, some serious, but they were alive. Ed quickly assessed the situation. The horses had settled, though snorting still. There was no hope for the wagon. It was snowing harder, and even if he could manage to unharness one of the Belgians, they were not trained to be ridden. Ed had to get help fast. There was no way he was sending one of the gang. With the help of 3 able to work blankets, rugs, and straw protected the rest from the cold. But what to do? Then he found Wolf urgently licking LJ's face. Keeping his voice calm, Ed talked to his son's best friend. He'd had a bad bump on the head, but was coming around. "Hey, pal, got a favor to ask. A favor from you and Wolf here." LJ nodded. He'd already figured it out. Rubbing Wolf's face and neck, he gave him the order. Wolf whined softly. He didn't want to leave LJ. Finally, he looked to Ed for instructions, and Ed gave them. After one last worried look back at his human brother, Wolf took off with startling speed toward the Roberts farm. Barb Roberts was first to hear the frantic barking on the front porch. She'd been listening for the hay wagon. "Joe, something's wrong. It's Wolf by himself." Alternatingly pulling on Joe's coat sleeve, barking and racing back toward the field, Wolf's urgency made the situation clear. Leaving Barbara to call in the ambulance and rescue crews, as well as close neighbors, Joe pulled the tractor from the barn and quickly hitched up the heaviest horse trailer he had. By the time he was ready, paramedics and several neighbors had arrived. There was no way the ambulance could make the field road. Equipment was quickly loaded into the horse trailer. Wolf was not happy. He growled, barked, and frantically raced from one to the other. Tom was only slightly less agitated. Their daughter, Rachel, was on the wagon. Finally, he gave Wolf the signal to go. Tom knew where he was going, and Wolf had done his job. It was well into morning when the last ambulance had gone. Ed's team had been brought in and stabled. Ed was back from the hospital and resting his dislocated knee. The injuries had totaled 2 concussions, 1 fractured arm, bruised ribs, and various cuts and bruises. The one fatality was the newly painted crimson hay wagon. Overall, it was just short of a miracle. It could have been so much worse. Credit was given where credit was due. After that night, a certain black poodle was often referred to as that lamb in wolf's clothing. And that is Wolf, a story by Carla Schurman. Thank you for listening. That was a darling story, and it really brought back a lot of memories for me. We didn't have any crimson wagons. We had wagons. They were old, kind of rickety, but very trustworthy. And thank goodness nothing that bad happened. But I remember having a few drifted in winters. And I do remember one Halloween when our kids were young that it snowed very hard and they had to cancel Halloween just till that next day. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story. And you know what? Listen to it again at bedtime with your kids or your puppies. This is Glenda. I'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.